Have you ever tried to do something good, something you love, and it just fell apart? Today I was baking Italian cookies in someone else's kitchen because my own is under construction. I didn't firm the dough enough. I set the timer wrong, and when I opened the oven, the cookies had spread everywhere, were overcooked, and just looked awful. And immediately the voice came in. What's wrong with you? You can't even do this right. And I realized that it isn't about the cookies. This is about how quickly we decide we're bad at something, how fast frustration turns into self judgment, and how often we quit, not because we can't do it, but because we're afraid to be patient with ourselves. So today at The Well, we're talking about cookie baking and a deeper lesson of why women give up on things they were never meant to abandon. Hello and welcome to The Well, where we come to the well as Christian women, being vulnerable and open to conversations that could be difficult or hard. Grab your cup of coffee or your cup of tea and join me in this discussion, this conversation, where I hope to open your hearts, open to your mind, and see that you are worthy and you are all welcome here. I'm your host, Colleen, and I am so excited to share this episode with you. We don't quit because we're incapable. We quit because we're frustrated. The frustration touches on old wounds of unworthiness. Yeah, that's kind of what happens. So I borrowed my kitchen because my kitchen is under construction. And if you listen to an earlier episode, I go into great detail about what's been happening since December, since I've moved to the lake and dealing with Western New York. So this is a follow-up episode because, as most of you know, I do love to bake, and I do usually make cookies every year. The kids have some favorites, so it is a little disappointment not to be able to bake. So I walk with a couple of gals in the community that I live in at Point Chautauqua, and they were fully aware of my situation. And one of them offered, she said, I was baking this week and I'd love for you to come and bake. And she's like, anytime all week I'm baking. So we made an arrangements to bake. Now, of course, when you're in a different kitchen, you're in a new environment. It's not your tools. There's different oven temperatures. Even my own oven, sometimes it runs a little hot. And if you've been cooking or baking a lot, you know your oven temperature, you know your own environment. And sometimes when you don't want to impose on anybody, you're kind of rushed. And cookie baking or any kind of baking needs time, needs patience, because I don't know if you ladies realize it, but the energy that we put off when we bake or we cook shows up in the end product because the ingredients are all using energy. There's energy in the whipping, there's energy in the chemicals between the baking powder, the baking soda, the amount of salt. Sometimes you think, well, if I do less salt, everybody's on a low salt diet, it's going to work out better. There's chemical reactions that happen. That is the reason why things don't come out like they should, is because we should never improvise on good quality recipes. So I wasn't failing. I was adapting to an unfamiliar situation. Conditions were not conducive. So I had to flip my brain and realize that I was in a totally different situation and environment. Ladies, sometimes our lives are in new seasons. Sometimes we're in a season where we've just retired. Sometimes we're in a busy season with a lot of kids around. We got kids in college. We got kids in grade school. Sometimes we're in a season where our bodies are changing, we're getting older, we need to slow down, we're getting some arthritis in, or we're in a season where our health is declining. Sometimes we need a health reset. Sometimes when we're in a season of grieving, we might have lost a good friend, we might have lost a spouse, we might have lost our children to marriage, and they're trying to find their way in a new situation with their in laws and their situation with their spouse. We could be in a season of caregiving with aging parents, and I was in that season for a while. Changes in marriage or work, maybe we've lost a job, maybe we have some career changes. These are all things that we need to be aware of this time of year. How many times do we judge ourselves without acknowledging that we're baking in a borrowed kitchen or we're baking in a new situation? Ladies, we have to name these situations. When I was baking and the cookies didn't turn out, it was like my inner critic come out bold and just kept saying to me, you know what? These cookies are not that hard. I bake all the time. Why are they not working? Sometimes my inner critic says, you know what? You should be perfect at cooking these cookies. Your mom was a good baker. Your grandma was an excellent cook. So what's wrong with you? Old scripts coming into play, like that old script of, you know what? You shouldn't be baking in the first place. You're on a diet. If you bake cookies, you're going to get fat. Emotions spiral. When I was working so hard, these Italian cookies were new to me. I thought, how hard could they be? And then sometimes I hear my mother-in-law say, maybe you should test that out before you try it. And I'm definitely in the test mode with these Italian ricotta cheese cookies. But you emotionally spiral. I spiral because I worked so hard to get the ingredients and to be able to have the batch just look like garbage. And ladies, we want the cookies to taste good. Presentation has always been a key. That's what I've been taught all of my life. My mom always said, it's the presentation, Colleen. It's the way the table looks. It's the way you present yourself. You might not have it all together, but if you put on the nice blouse and the pearls and look the part, you could be falling apart inside. And that's when I looked at these cookies, I was like, you know what? Not one more thing that is going wrong, today. It was like everything from not having a kitchen to not being able to have the kids at my house. It just was so overwhelming. I just wanted to break down and cry. But yet I realized, even though I was emotionally spiraling, I realized, you know what? I don't want to show my emotions in this unfamiliar place with this unfamiliar person, this neighbor that thinks of me as strong and all put together. She probably would have been fine and she probably would have taken care of my needs. But how many times do we hide what's actually going on inside? Think about this. How many times have you gone to the grocery store or you're at church and someone walks up to me and says, how are you doing? And you said, I'm fine. Unless someone asks the correct question, like, how are you doing today? Or how things really going for you? That you really do open up that window to people. Most of the time we say we're fine because we don't want to open that Pandora box and tell people what's really going on. Plus, in today's world, we feel that everybody's got something going on, and why should I air my dirty laundry because my situation is minimal compared to what they might be going through? But sometimes, as you remember in other episodes, I talk about, ladies, we need each other. We need each other to be vulnerable. We need each other to share in that grief, share in that anxiety, and to help us with our emotions. Because life is challenging today, and many of us are on so many medications to control our emotions that if we talked about it, we dealt with the hard together as a community of faithful women, we might be better off. One batch of cookies suddenly became a verdict on my competency. Yep, I wasn't competent. If I can't make a cookie, then how could I do other hard things in my life? How can I help guide other women to the well and minister them if I can't even bake an Italian cookie? Well, you know what? I had to do a pivot or a shift. This is the mind reacting before the body can regulate. Sometimes you have to take a pause and realize that it's not so bad. What was really beautiful is my friend's kitchen that I was in. She came and tasted the cookie and said, "These aren't half bad." So I looked at some of them and I said, some of them are really hard and some of them I did have to throw away because, again, the appearance was not to my liking. But just that gentle, they don't taste that bad, gave me permission to say, okay, I'm going to frost them, put the sprinkles on, and I'll eat them. I won't present them to the kids or give them to anybody, but I can eat them. They're not so bad. I can have them with a cup of coffee. When your frustration sets in, your body tightens and your nervous system kicks in. You really set yourself up for anxiety and turmoil. We move into that shame instead of curiosity. So that's where I want you to hear my heart and say, ladies, stop, pause, breathe. Be aware of what's going on. When something like the cookie baking process doesn't go well, don't automatically throw all the ingredients. Maybe we can rectify the thing and really need to pause, take a breath, walk away from the situation and take a moment to breathe. It's not easy. I can tell you that because I was right in the thick of things. I was just about ready to throw everything out, throw in the towel. If it wasn't for my neighbor friend to come over and say, these aren't half bad, if I was in my own kitchen, I would have thrown them out. Because if someone else walked through that door, if it was maybe my husband or my son or my daughter, or even my mom, God rest her soul, she would have said, these cookies are awful. You can't serve these. And yet again, we go to that memory of an unforgotten or a wound where someone said something to you, you were in an emotional space, you yelled, you went inside and you didn't really ask God to show you what was going on in that situation. Something to think about. In the God body method, we don't ask what's wrong with me. We ask, what is the moment? What in this moment is God trying to teach me? What is actually going on and why am I responding that way? That, ladies, takes a little bit more work. Let me take you back to the cookie lesson today, ladies. These ricotta cookies needed to be not just like a drop cookie. They needed to be firmer, round, shaped, harder, round balls. Once I learned that, I was able to rest in that I can rectify the rest of the batter. That timing does matter. And that heat transforms, but not too much to destroy. That looking at the timer and realizing that I put the timer on not for 7 seconds, but 7 minutes and realized that was a mistake. And I was able to pull them out and still salvage them. Ladies, formation requires patience. Nothing beautiful rushes the oven or rushing anything. You might be exactly in the place where God wants you to sit patiently and wait. When we rush through life, we miss those God wink moments where God wants to show you and test you. And he wants to explore your heart and show you something that if you're rushing past it, you miss. And if you miss those moments, if you miss the cookie experience, and if I would have thrown out the cookies, I would have missed the beauty of looking at it and saying, I'm not a failure. I can bake cookies. I just have to stop, slow down, and be aware and ask my friend, how in the world does her oven timer work? Or use my phone for a timer. Sometimes you just need to pivot. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and completely lacking nothing. James, we need to get to the heart of this and actually open our hearts to see that how often do we need to just quiet ourselves, quiet our health journey, be quiet in prayer, quiet to take some time to learn new things, be quiet in the joy, find a joyful moment in everything that we do. Because we are worthy because God created us. And we have to remember that. You know, when you just take some time to rest and quiet your mind, your body, and your soul, there's so many things that we learn from that. We become to be the master of our practicing skills. Through repetition, we learn that we are actually skilled at so many things. We don't want to let the confusion and the discomfort cause us to feel like a failure. You know, women have carried generations of pressure. And this pressure has been passed down to many of us ladies. So we don't need to fold in the towel because we're weak. We fold in the towel because we're tired of feeling like we're not enough. But we are enough. We are divinely created. I didn't stop baking. I laughed, I learned, and I tried again. And it isn't the stopping. It's not the failure. It's taking a minute to kind of laugh at yourself and bring joy. Isn't that what God's inviting us to, ladies? He's inviting us with our bodies, our hearts, our callings. Our callings are divine, and they're divinely created by God who created us. God never said you failed. He says, come closer. Let me show you. Let me show you what I mean when the cookie doesn't come out right. He was showing me that I needed to be patient. He was showing me that it's not in the baking of the cookies. It's taking the time to be aware of my environment and be blessed that my neighbor opened her home, opened her kitchen so that I could make this Italian cookie. It also made me realize that maybe I'm not the best at that cookie, but there's so many other kinds of cookies that work out for the good. And isn't that the blessing? Sometimes women just don't want to bake or don't want to cook or don't want to make dinner for their family because they just say they're not good at it. Ladies, you're good at so many things. It's just you're not patient enough. And if you're aware of that, and your husband is better skilled, or your child's better skilled in the kitchen, because we all have gifts, then by all means, give up that spatula. Or for me, give up that particular cookie and find where God is showing me of the cookies and the gifts that I'm good at. You know, I don't know if you've ever taken the spiritual gifts inventory, but that is so important to take some time. And I will link that in the show notes, the spiritual gifts inventory for yourself to really find what God has given you and what are the gifts, you know, the gifts of wisdom and fortitude. And once we know what our spiritual gifts are, it makes it a lot easier to go into situations, put ourselves in a new environment and bake those cookies. This week, ladies, I want you to notice where you're tempted to quit, not dramatically, but quietly. The things you tell yourself you're just not good at. Instead of folding in the towel and curling up in a ball, pause and ask, am I failing or am I still forming? I would say, ladies, we're all still forming. And that's my prayer for you, all who listen, is that together we're forming, we're cultivating, we're nurturing each other. We're finding our hearts with Him and we're finding our hearts together. And that's the beauty of coming to the well. Coming to the well vulnerable and listening and hearing God's heart for you today. Take one small step back into that thing, not to be perfect at it, but to practice grace. Ladies, journal. Take some time to spread out your cookie moments. And for you, it might not be a cookie moment. It might be a moment at the dressing room at Kohl's. It might be a moment on your drive to pick up the kids. It might be a moment at a Christmas party. Pray before quitting. Try again once with curiosity, not criticism. If your cookies didn't come out today, if they spread all over the cookie sheet, you're still a baker. If you're frustrated, you're still becoming. Come back to the well with me where nothing is wasted, not even the batches that didn't turn out right. You're most welcome at the well. Ladies, if this episode touched you, please share it with a friend, like it, and follow Sustain a Well, where each and every week we come to the well, vulnerably asking questions and open our hearts to the message that God has in store for us. Till next time, ladies, thank you for joining me at Come to the Well.